Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Sugerman, and I am Dean of the Faculty of Arts at Ryerson University. I'm delighted to welcome you today to our Democracy Forum, featuring the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge the land on which Ryerson University is situated. Ryerson is on the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. It is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 13, and the Williams Treaties. I recite this land acknowledgement not simply as a performative act, but as symbolic of a much more concrete, meaningful, and transformative project that involves the recruitment and retention of Indigenous faculty, Indigenous students, and hopefully the revisioning of our curricula, methodological assumptions, and pedagogical approaches informed by Indigenous knowledge. It is now my pleasure to welcome the President of Ryerson, Dr. Mohammed Lashmi. President Lashmi will open today's event.
Thank you, Pam, and welcome everyone. While I'm delighted to be part of this afternoon forum, I'm especially pleased that Premier Ford has taken the time to join us for an insightful conversation around recovery in the time of COVID-19. Welcome, Premier Ford. Over the years, the Premier and the province of Ontario have been great partners with our university on a number of fronts, supporting campus mental health and wellness, student entrepreneurship, and various research and innovation initiatives, just to name a few. Ryerson University has found strong partners with the provincial government during normal times, but this types of partnership are even more important now as we continue to combat COVID-19 and support a strong provincial and national economic recovery. On behalf of the Ryerson University community, I want to thank you, Premier, for your strong and accountable leadership throughout this pandemic. I have no doubt that you will not only continue to help navigate our province and our country back to economic prosperity and stronger future for all Canadians, but you will definitely put us in a very strong position vis-a-vis all the issues we are dealing with. At Ryerson, we have worked closely with the provincial government to work towards Ontario-made solutions. Solutions like mask-making partnerships and research initiatives that support the province restart and recovery efforts. We know that post-secondary education institutions like Ryerson University will be key pillars in supporting the future prosperity of our province and the long-term competitiveness of our economy. That is why we continue to work hard to support the growth and learning of high-skilled talent here at Ryerson. They play an integral role in strengthening our province's modern workforce and contributing to the economic recovery and sustainability of our country. The Premier and his government have rightfully highlighted the need for reskilling and upskilling of talent that will both serve individual needs and contribute to companies that are more resilient and, of course, a stronger economy. Going forward, I am excited to work with Premier Ford and the provincial government to continue to encourage entrepreneurship, cultivate community, and support a safe and strong economic recovery here in Ontario and across our country. Premier Ford, thank you once again for joining us here at Ryerson University, and I look forward to listening in on today's discussion. I will now hand things off to Martin Cohn, who is a political columnist for the Toronto Star and a visiting practitioner in the Faculty of Arts here at Ryerson. Martin is the founder of Ryerson's Democracy Forum, and through important events like this, has been a strong link connecting our faculty and our students with key community leaders and decision makers. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Lashmi, and welcome, Premier Ford. Welcome to all our Ryerson students and faculty. We're also streaming this live on thestar.com, so a special welcome to Toronto Star readers, and thank you for subscribing to Canada's biggest and best newspaper. That's my little plug, forgive me. We launched the Ryerson Democracy Forum about 3 years ago, and the idea was to bring together, just before the last election, 4 of the major party leaders to come together, not to tear each other down like in the Donald Trump-Joe Biden debate last week, but to try to compare notes about how to get you more engaged, our voters, students at Ryerson, and the Ontario electorate. And Premier Ford, you are not yet leader, but you are not yet premier, but we've been saving you a seat. So thank you for coming today and agreeing to be on the hot seat. If you're watching today, you don't need me really to introduce Doug Ford, but as a political columnist at Queen's Park, I want to just give you a little bit of color commentary. Doug Ford is the 26th Premier of Ontario, and he won election. He won a landslide, it's fair to say, in 2018 and toppled a 15-year Liberal dynasty with his populist brand of politics. He first entered politics about a decade ago. Off and on, he's been in politics now when he ran for city council, but he did have a life before politics. He ran his family's manufacturing label printing company out of Toronto and Chicago, and he does have 4 adult daughters who keep him grounded. A little secret maybe, he also does not eat red meat and he does not drink. So I don't know how he would fit in at any university campus, but thank you for coming. Now the answers we get from the Premier will only be as good as the questions that you ask and that I ask. So get ready and send your questions using the Q&A function. I believe it's at the bottom of your screen if you're on the desktop. And Melissa Wong from Ryerson will be gathering the questions and handing them off to me because we don't have much time today, and I will read them out. So I'm going to get the ball rolling first, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for as much time as we have left. Feel free to share your thoughts on Twitter in the meantime. So our title today is Recovery in the Time of COVID-19. In the time of COVID-19. So we're not trying to drill down like a news conference, because the Premier gives news conferences almost every day at Queen's Park. This is a democracy forum. We're trying to look more at how the province is going to recover in terms of not just medically, but economically, politically, and so on. Now, Mr. Ford, we talked about the landslide that you had in the last election, but it's fair to say that you had a bit of a downward slide after a few months in office, like most politicians. But you were having some altercations, let's say, with Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, with John Tory, the mayor, with Kathleen Wynne, very hard on her. And, you know, judges were overruling you and you were threatening to overrule them, and you were jousting with the media. And then the world changed. We had a pandemic, and our world is being turned upside down. So we've all changed. And I guess my first question to get us warmed up is to just ask you to tell our audience a little bit about how you've changed and why you've changed. And don't just say you've always been this way, because your tone is different. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, Martin, thank you so much for having me on. And my friend Mohammed, thank you. You're doing a great job along with the Dean. Thank you so much for all of you for doing a great job over at Ryerson and showing the true Ontario spirit when we needed the support, and the Ryerson stepped up, as they always do, and really helped out. And to answer your question, Martin, I think any time someone gets into a new position, be it in the private sector or public sector, you have an opportunity to really learn and see some of the bumps and maybe some of the things that you might have done differently if you look back. And I truly believe after this well, going through the pandemic and leading up to the pandemic, I truly believe it's better if we collaborate together. We get a lot more done. We cooperate with each other, and it's critical. Communication is so important. And it made sure that I reached out to all the party leaders and built up a relationship. I've known Mayor Tory for 20 some odd years. I didn't really know the Prime Minister that well. And I built up an incredible relationship with the Prime Minister's number 2 person, Chrystia Freeland. We've become good pals. I talk to her almost every single day. And it's amazing when you collaborate together and you put the political stripes aside and don't worry if you're from the Green Party, the blue, the orange, the red party. Put that aside, because as the most common saying is, we're all in it together. And when we work together and put all those political stripes aside, it's amazing what we can get done together through the pandemic, but also when it comes to healthcare and protecting the safety of the people of Ontario, and economically too. It goes hand in hand. And we just had an incredible relationship. Have a great relationship with the 444 mayors in Ontario.
Going back, if I can just jump in, is it fair to say that you won't go back, that this is better, that Doug Ford 2.0 is working better than Doug Ford 1.0?
Well, this is the way I'm going to be. I'm going to be this way moving forward. I'm not going to go back. You get in here, and when you make some changes, there's some tough decisions to be made, and people are used to the same way for 15 years, and it just wasn't feasible to keep moving forward. And I had to make some tough choices, and then certain ones, matter of fact, all of them, I'm quite happy I made, even though they might have been controversial. But I like this type of governing. Honestly, I like the collaboration and working together, and again, put politics aside. And I've never been big, and don't get me wrong, Martin, I've always said I'm very proud to be the leader of the PC party, but our family's never been elected by PC members 100%. We get elected by traditional NDP voters or traditional members of the Liberal Party. And
let me jump in there, because politics is not a dirty word if you believe in democracy, as I do, and as a political reporter. So, but you mentioned the Liberals and Kathleen Wynne. You had a really interesting exchange with Kathleen Wynne last week in the legislature. I was there with my colleague Rob Benzie. We were wearing masks, but it was you've been very hard on her, and she's been hard on you, and you were calling for investigations and stuff like that. And now there's these grace notes between you. What happened between you and Kathleen Wynne to change your style of the way you talk to each other, the discourse?
Well, I can tell you, even during the campaign, Kathleen Wynne was never mean. She was never rude, never mean, and she's a very, very nice person. And the other day when she asked me a question, I couldn't get upset with Kathleen. She's the only person in that whole chamber that's walked a mile in my shoes. Unfortunately, it wasn't through a pandemic, but the pressures that the Premier faces and the decisions that come across the desk every single day, tough decisions. But I can tell you, Martin, I never make a decision by myself. I bounce it off. I'm a consensus builder. I got to bounce it off 50 people before we make a decision of all different areas too, and different political stripes, to make sure we're making the best decision that we feel we can make, especially with this pandemic.
Okay, well, let me pick up on that. So you're right. You don't just get Tory votes, because you did win a landslide, and then you went down a bit.
Yep.
But now you're having a bit of a second honeymoon. That's just not me saying that, and I'm not buttering you up. There's a poll in the Toronto Star this week saying that you are twice as popular as the other two parties, who are tied almost for second, NDP and then Liberals at 24%. You're at 48%. You would win an even larger landslide today. But you know, and I know, that those numbers go up and down, just like they do with COVID-19, and you will be judged on the pandemic. So far, so good in terms of your political support, but obviously we are in for a rough ride with the second wave. So my question to you, in terms of that decision-making process you talk about, looking back over these last 6 months, because nobody's perfect, what would you do differently on the pandemic, whether it's the messaging, whether it's the masking, because you just did that the other day, you made it mandatory province-wide, but My columns are always friendly, but I was wondering why you didn't do this about a month and a half ago instead of letting each city do it. So you tell us, what would you do differently?
Boy, that's a good question. One that comes, and you mentioned masking, one comes to the top of my head. If I would have known what I know now before the pandemic, and I guess everyone remembers the time our closest ally, closest friend in the world, the United States, President Trump cut us off. I just still can't get over it. Yes, he's not on my Christmas card list, and I'm obviously ticked off on him. Ticked off at him because, and I don't care if it's President Trump or President Biden, any country to cut their closest ally off. And remember, Martin, back in 9/11, we opened up our airports. We opened up our folks out in Newfoundland, and that's what neighbors do to each other. You don't cut people off, and I'm still ticked off over it, but I called out for help. And I called out for help to the companies out there, and within a few days, we had 26,000 companies go on the portal. And it's just amazing how everyone just banded together. We all got together, and large, medium, and small companies switched over their lines and started to produce the face shields and face masks. Ryerson and everyone else were pitching in. And it was just an incredible feeling how quickly we made the transition within a couple of months.
But let me jump in here. So fair point. We got shortchanged on the masks, but now we have them, and it's taken us a long time to make them mandatory. So why so long on the mandatory, and why not get the message out more cleanly on masking? Because it's been muddled, I think, or confusing or mixed messages on a couple of other issues as well: testing, class sizes, and so on.
So the masking, what I truly believe, first of all, Ontario is close, or I think larger than California and Texas combined. We have 9 regions that have 0 cases, and the rural parts up north. And until I was elected, Martin, and you travel from one end of this province way up the Kenora Rainy River, and then they tell you there's another 500 kilometers up north still. It's a massive area. And so what we decided to let each region, each chief medical officer in the region make their decisions. We do have the hot spots, the large municipalities, be it Ottawa or Toronto and Peel region. And every company I was going into, they were following the guidelines and the protocols, especially the food manufacturers or assembly lines in the automotive sector. Even before I asked for it, they were all masking. They were screening people before they came into their facilities. And I just believe in letting each region make their decision. And that's the way we've kind of governed on this pandemic, with collaboration from everyone, as long as it makes sense. And so far, everything seems to be going fairly well.
Okay, well, I will leave some more COVID questions for the students. Now I've got one that's close to my heart. This is a Ryerson Democracy Forum, and I'm just going to go to audience questions after this. So Melissa, you can queue them up if you're ready. But this is important for me because I'm passionate about democracy. It's not a trick question, but it's a serious question. A lot of people complain about proportional representation or ranked ballots, which I might like, but that's not going to happen. But there is one thing that you have the power to fix right away, and we know that because we fixed it before in this province. A few years ago, under the last Liberal government, it was the Wild West in terms of fundraising, corporate contributions, union contributions. It was a mess, and there was a lot of dirty money as well. And so all the parties, including your party under your predecessor, agreed to change things, to ban those company contributions and to allow for public support of each party based on how they did in the last election. Some people call it per vote subsidies. I think you called it that. But we know, and you and I both know, that there are already giant subsidies for the big fat cat donors who get as much as 75% back in a tax credit. Whereas other folks who are hurting in this pandemic don't have the money to donate now, and your party and the other parties, Liberals, New Democrats, are hitting people up for money in this pandemic, using the pandemic. This is a rough time to raise money. Why don't you go back to where we were and return public support for each party, $2 per voter to go to each party, fair and square, all parties support it, Isn't it time to bring that back?
Well, Martin, really good question. You make a really good, valid point. I just don't believe that everyone should be forced to pay if they don't support a certain political party or any political parties. They might not even vote, which is disappointing. I encourage them to vote. So really, it was a mandatory $2, if you want to call it, subsidy to each of the parties. And right now, we kind of took the federal rules. I think it's $1,600 you can donate, and really, it gives the people the option. So if you don't, and you do get a tax credit, you're right. If you don't want to contribute, then you aren't going to be taxed. And that's kind of the approach I took. And sometimes it benefits parties, sometimes it doesn't benefit parties, but at least it gives the option and the freedom of people. You can either donate $10, you can donate up to $1,600. But most importantly, no one can influence Doug Ford, no matter what the amount is. And in saying that, I truly believe that with other parties too. I truly believe no one can influence the NDP, the Liberals, the Green, or the PCs. And for $1,600, that's not much for personal donations. We don't allow any companies, any unions, any of the big donors. So that's kind of the approach I took.
All right, to be continued in future columns. Stand by. I'm going to keep at this because I think it's a mistake, with all due respect, but I've heard you out and other people have had a chance to hear you. So maybe you'll give this some thought, because I got to say, it's not about choosing. Sometimes you just can't afford it. So it's not coming out of your pocket, it's coming out of the Treasury, and it's a way to level the playing field. On that note, let's go over to students. And a reminder, by the way, when you use the Q&A function, folks, you can indicate whether you want to have your name attached to the question or have it anonymous, and keep the questions short so we can go through a lot of them. Here's one. There's no name attached to this one. It's actually coming up a couple of times from different folks. Will you be providing any support or extra financial assistance for students who are struggling due to COVID? And I'm going to merge that with another question, a bit of a composite here. What will you be doing to help post-secondary students as they struggle to find jobs in the post-COVID world? Everyone's thinking post-pandemic. Over to you, Premier.
Great question. And just to go back, when we got elected, we were the only government that I can ever remember that reduced tuition fees by 10%. And also with the loans that the student loans that we forgave on the interest on payments for 6 months. That's a way to help them. But most important was your last question, because every time I talk to the students, they're worried about the economy, especially if they're in their last year and they're going out to look for a job. It's absolutely critical that we create an environment. And I always say government doesn't create jobs, but we can help create the environment for companies and people to thrive and grow and prosper. And that's what we're going to continue doing. When we first took office, the previous government had lost 300,000 jobs with the help of people like the universities and colleges, training some of the brightest minds in the entire world right here in Ontario. And because of some of the businesses and some of the regulations we're able to remove, our biggest problem back in, let's say, last year, October, November, December, before the pandemic hit us, was we didn't have enough people here. We were short 250,000 people. We had created, not we, the people out there, businesses created 307,000 new jobs, and the economy was just booming. And I remember calling the Prime Minister and saying, Prime Minister, I need more people. I don't care if they're skilled or unskilled. We need more people in Ontario. If they're unskilled, we'll train them. If they're skilled, we'll put them into the spot where they're needed. And it's just so important that we welcome people from around the world, bring them into Ontario. I really want to grow this province. I understand over the next decades, there's going to be 4 or 5 million more people coming to Ontario, and I welcome them with open arms, because we need the skill, we need the diversification here, and that's why I think we have the greatest province in the world. And when I travel around the world, mostly the U.S., because they're our #1 trading partner, we do $400 million a year, about $400 billion a year of two-way trade with the U.S., 390 to be exact. Right now, we're an economic powerhouse per capita. We're leading North American economic development, job creation before this pandemic. And I go around the North America, as I was saying, with Vic Fideli, the Minister of Economic Development. The number one tool I use are colleges and universities and our young people. We have the brightest. And before I became premier, I didn't have the privilege to go to all the colleges and universities. I went to Ryerson. I love the incubator program before I got elected. Big fan of Ryerson and some other universities, obviously Waterloo with the tech side. But I was able to go to other colleges and other universities, and the students they're pumping out of there are staggering how bright they are and how innovative, and the ingenuity that they have is far none the best I've ever seen anywhere. And so when we go out there and we attract companies, we always say we have the brightest and the best, and I truly believe that. Anywhere in the world, please come to Ontario. You have great quality of life. It's very diverse, and we have the brightest and the best. And that's my sales pitch when I'm out there to companies.
Okay, let me jump in and keep this going so we get to a few more questions. And this one comes from Andrea Harrison Moyles, and I hear this at a lot of universities when I go out with politicians. For students with mental health limitations, what encouragement can you provide to university students who are working from home?
So mental health and I added this, so we were the only government, again, in the history of Ontario to have a dedicated ministry for mental health, and I added addiction too. There's so many people right now, and even before, struggling with mental health and addiction. And we've put $3.8 billion with contribution equally, $1.9 billion each from the federal government and ourselves. We put I believe it's $19.25 million into universities to help with mental health. And I'm passionate about this. There's no secret. My brother had an addiction, and until you live it, and a family member has it, you don't realize, and it's tough. And so we're going to really focus on helping people get back on their feet, and a lot of people do, Martin. They get back on their feet if they have the proper support, and I'm passionate about that. Our Minister Tobolo is doing a great job, and he's passionate. And I picked Minister Tobolo. He was very knowledgeable about mental health prior to getting involved in politics.
Can I quickly jump in? We're going to talk about America later on. If you were watching the American debate, what did you think when Donald Trump bore in on Joe Biden about his son and addiction issues?
It gets so frustrating. There's an unwritten rule, and Martin, you probably know this, in politics, at least in Canada, and I say it's unwritten. Some people go over the line. There's an unwritten rule, and every politician knows this. You never attack someone's family. You can go after the person, but don't go after their family. They have nothing to do with it. And I thought it was terrible. It was disgusting. I thought, honestly, the whole debate was disgusting on both sides. They're both going at each other like two little kids in high school. What they should be doing, if I can give them both advice equally, look at the people and tell them what you're going to do for the people. Don't worry about, I'm right, you're wrong. This guy's a bad guy. He's an idiot. This guy. And I sat back and thought, I have some friends in the U.S. and I called a few and I said, you have 330 million people and you can't find two better people than what you have up there right now? It was embarrassing for the United States. And
okay,
I couldn't even tell you the truth. I couldn't even watch all of it. It was so frustrating.
Let's go back to problem solving. Good question here from Paula Tran. We got a lot of COVID questions, but this one is a different spin on it. She says, Toronto Public Health said that out of 45 active community outbreaks, 44% were in restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues. You said you don't want to close restaurants if you don't have to. So what is the province doing to protect the young workers who are in those restaurants and service industries? Now, this is my comment on top of Paula's. You've talked a lot. It's a complicated issue. It's a trade-off between protecting customers, protecting the community, and protecting the owners. As you said, these are a lot of small operations. But Paula's question is a good one. What about the workers in those restaurants? How do you protect them?
Well, the first thing, and it's very, very tough, Martin, complicated. The first thing is make sure they work at one place. They aren't jumping from place to place. And it's easy for us to sit back and say, when someone wants to earn some more money, say, no, just work at one place. And what I'm doing, I'm going to go after the bad actors. And I've been doing a lot of restaurants, and it breaks my heart. You go in there, the majority of them are family. I'm not talking the big conglomerates. They can take care of themselves, but these small mom and pop restaurants that might employ 5-10 people, that put their life savings, everything they have, into their small business. And they're following the guidelines. They have 6 to a table. They're making sure they take all the contact information. They have dividers up. They have the social distance between each of the tables of 2 meters. And they're wearing all masks. There's hand sanitizing. They're doing everything they can. And it's so hard. Going back to the mental health question, just imagine in just one drop of a dime, they barely hung on. A lot didn't. They barely hung on. Last time they're scraping by, and all of a sudden, in just one clean sweep, I'm going to wipe out possibly 75,000 people's lives. I can't do that without seeing, and I've done it before. And if it gets really bad, I won't hesitate to do it again. I just want to go on record. But we have to just see the evidence. And when I brought it to the command table, we have some really, really smart doctors, epidemiologists, experts in all different fields, and very diverse group. We had people from Toronto and other regions. And when they looked at it, they said, we just don't see the numbers to justify a mass closing. And when we say closing, putting people out of business, there's a lot of second guessing going on, and that's part of democracy. But tell us, what would it take for you, and what would it take for your experts? There's a lot of outside experts. There's a lot of epidemiologists, but you've also got some your own staff of public health officials and medical doctors and so on. What would it take? Well, and the other thing I want to add is also increasing the inspections. So we have the Ministry of Labor. I had a meeting with them today over the phone, and they're going to ramp up the inspections. And really what I do is I go back, and I've always done this right from the get-go. I rely on health and science. And when health and science shows us the evidence, then we move forward. To put an exact number, Martin, I just can't put an exact number. I automatically go back to our health team and the doctors. And I want to emphasize something. It's not one doctor that makes a decision. It's not, be it Dr. Williams or Dr. Heyer or any of the doctors around the table. They all consult. They all talk to the other regional municipalities, and they come up with a solution together. And then they present it to myself, and then we go to cabinet and caucus, and man, is there debates. Oh my goodness. My last 2 cabinet and caucus calls lasted for over 4 hours. And my friends, you should hear the debates. They're good, they're healthy, I encourage them. People take total opposite views on both sides. And then at the end of the day, I'll revert back to listening to the people, but I have to rely on health and science. I'm not a doctor, and I just rely on the experts and on a lot of it, by the way.
Quick question from Noah Poulin, or Poulin. I apologize about the name pronunciation. Good question. How can you ensure that public health messaging about COVID-19 reaches younger people more effectively? There's a lot out there, but how do you make it effective? And if I can just add to that, I haven't heard you talk a lot about the COVID Alert app. I know you support it because you've spoken out about it, but it's kind of fallen by the wayside, and you kind of let your friend, the Premier of Quebec, off the hook a little bit. You said you were going to raise it at supper when you had your de-alcoholized beer and he had his Quebec beer. But the fact is, a lot of people ask me, well, why is Doug Ford drinking that beer? And you could tell they were different consistencies. But it took him until today, the Premier of Quebec, to do this. So messaging for young people, and let's give a shout out to this COVID Alert app because we're behind on contact tracing. Over to you.
Well, it is. It's a great tool. It's one of many tools, and it's not the total solution. We have different tools, but the COVID Alert app, I kind of really pushed the rest of the premiers, and it took a little while. I understand PEI came on board as well, along with Quebec and some other provinces. We have, I believe it's 3 million people that are using it. And when it started, I figured it would be about 8% of the overall population. And it's absolutely critical that we move forward. Shopify, Ontario company, put it together. We presented it to the federal government. They took it and said, yeah, this is great. let's move on it. So
let me keep you back on track on the messaging though for young people, not just the app. That was my fault. Sorry, it's my personal passion. But you've got a way, your own way, the Doug Ford thing about slapping people down when they're misbehaving and so on. If they're having big parties and get your head checked at the MRI. I can't keep track of these phrases. I know that the Quebec Premier was shaking his head at one of them at the conference you had with him. But how do you actually make that message sink in for folks who don't need to be beaten up, not the ones who are misbehaving, but about masking? And a question I want to ask you from Bana Yurgalim, who says, for example, whenever I go to Toronto, she's in Mississauga, he or she, a lot of people are not wearing masks inside buildings, and it's the law. So her question is, how do you enforce that? Give us a clear message on enforcement and compliance.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back to how we're going to communicate with the younger people. And unlike an old guy like myself that isn't as savvy on social media as some of the younger people is going on different apps and going on TikTok, Snapchat, and all the rest on Twitter, and getting the message out. And also within communities, we're really focusing on advertising within the ethnic communities too. In my area, I have a pocket of multi-generational people living in one home, and I understand that. Like, it's hard to buy a home, so I get that part. But we really have to continue getting the message out there and just making sure that people understand. And I have 4 young girls, probably a couple of years older than everyone that's listening. And I tell them too the same thing, guys, please don't go out to a party, just hang in there. Thanksgiving is coming around. That's tough. And I hear about the messaging because sometimes people hear the federal government saying one thing, the province says another, and the municipalities are saying another. And I've had this conversation with the feds and municipalities and saying, guys, keep the message simple and let's just get the message out there. We all need to tighten up the circle over Thanksgiving, stick with your household. But you know what else is really, really tough, Martin? And there's so many people, and it's really hard. There's so many people living by themselves, be it seniors or young people, and it gets depressing. You're sitting in there in your condo, your home by yourself. You get a little squirrely after sitting there for a while. And I just think if you have a cohort that you've always been around and you keep it tight, I understand the situation they're into. It's very, very difficult for people. Very.
Okay, a good question here from Suzanne, and I promise this is not a question that I wrote. These are her words. She said, prior to COVID, you were regarded as the Trump of Ontario for what Martin has already described as a combative style. Good question though, how do you propose that we hold you to account to continue on a path away from a Trump style to a collaborative path that puts Ontarians first, for example, adopting liberal NDP or green ideas? Interesting multi-partisan question.
Sure, no, I agree. And boy, that was a real slap calling me Donald Trump, but because I'm anything but Donald Trump. And I'm not going to sit here and I've hammered this guy enough already publicly. I'm just myself, and I think it's so important that we work together, and I think we've shown it. A good pal of mine is Premier Horgan out in BC. I call him. We're going through the pandemic, getting his advice. I talk to other Liberal premiers and also with Chrystia Freeland. I guess that would be the best example on how we go back and forth and collaborate and get things done. I wish I could tell everyone some of the stuff that, from the beginning of the pandemic to the end, I'd be here for 3 hours, all the things Christine and I were able to move forward at nighttime, just calling, hey, let's get this done, let's do that, what do you think of this, and so on and so forth. So I met with all the leaders the other day, to the exception, I guess Andrew had a dental appointment or something, which is fine. But I want to continue on speaking with them, collaborating with them, coming up with ideas. And I understand what they have to do. They're in opposition. They have to go after me, and I guess that's politics. But federally, I think we're like a good tag team. Christy and I, we're doing a good job working together, and along with all the other premiers of all different political stripes, we have the best group of premiers I've ever seen. I'm not just saying it, we really do. We work so closely together. I'll give you an example, and I said it on my newscast. And I always call out for help. I'm not too shy to call out for help. I've called out for help God knows how many times. So I called out for help from our other premiers. And Premier King from PEI, 157,000 people stepped up and sent us 2,000 testing kits, which is total 8,000 tests. And this is a little province, PEI. And then during the pandemic, they sent us a tractor trailer load up to the hospital of meals for the frontline healthcare workers. This is Team Canada. We stick together. I've never seen patriotism run so high in our country. And that goes back to what I'm promoting about the economy. Folks, please buy Ontario-made products when you can. I know it's not possible by 100%. I wish it could be. But if we change our buying habits a little bit, buy, made in Canada, Little Maple Leaf or Ontario-made, we can create tens of thousands of jobs for family, friends, neighbors, people in communities. And we can do it, and we will do it. Just imagine 10% of let's say, 200 billion of trade. If we keep 10%, that's $20 billion we can keep here in Ontario. And the other area is we have to start looking at the government procurement. So we're going out there, and some stuff.
Let me jump in there because I'm being held accountable by Suzanne, and her specific question was, how do we hold you accountable if you stray? And let me merge that with, you had the meeting with the opposition leaders, the other parties last week. How was that meeting, and are you going to make that work? I mean, I don't think anybody expects you all to agree. I think voters like it, and I think I like it too, when you talk to each other instead of shouting at each other. Yeah, no, I like it better when we talk to each other instead of shouting as well. I think we had a good conversation. I know I got Stephen Del Duca has reached out to me before this with some ideas, and it doesn't hurt. I think it's good if we can collaborate and to hold me accountable. I guess every day at 1 o'clock, the whole province could hold me accountable. And it's a rarity. I think we should continue with the 1 o'clock being held accountable. And I think that's a great way to hold people accountable there. Okay, and the 1 o'clock, of course, is a reference to your almost daily news conferences. Every day. I want to wrap up. We're almost out of from the beginning. Not one day. We're almost out of time, and so I want to just ask a last question that relates to our Ryerson Democracy Forum. And we talked a couple of times today about the U.S., but I want to talk about the economy in the U.S. In the last election, your slogan, you had a couple of slogans. One of them was "Buck a beer." Let's not go there. Let's set that aside. The other slogan, though, was that Ontario is open for business. And you were just talking about procurement. And you set up those road signs at the border, come on down. And the problem, as you know, is that the pandemic happened. And Donald Trump happened. And he slapped tariffs on our exports. So he was bad for our business. And you and other premiers want the border closed, although it's still working for commercial traffic and fairness. So I wanted to just ask you a little bit about you've talked about Donald Trump as a politician, but how do you keep the economic connection going, and how do you keep our politics from not going in that direction? Well, I have a phenomenal relationship, and so does Christia, with Ambassador Bob Lighthizer. He's kind of the go-to guy that makes the deals around the world. He's very, very pragmatic. And I called him up when I heard about the aluminum tariffs. And I don't hold back, Martin. I just told him, that's it. I like you, Bob, but I'm protecting Ontario and protecting Canada, and the gloves are coming off, so get ready, I'm coming at you. And he understands, but I don't care if it's President Biden, President Trump, President whoever. We have to make sure that we work side by side with our largest trading partner. And we're the number one customer to 19 states. We're number 2 to 9 others. We're instrumental in creating 9 million jobs down in the U.S. And I always say we can go out and we put tariffs on them back and forth, but
But the best way to get at them, yes, we can put tariffs. The best way, buy Canadian, buy Ontario-made products. Get our the Walmarts, the Costco's, the Loblaws, the Metros, the Sobeys, the Canadian Tires, the hardware stores, Home Depots. Write them a letter and say, we want you to buy more Canadian products. And that will keep the money within the country. And I think we came out, both, all of us, all the provinces, the Prime Minister, myself, everyone went swinging at the U.S. And I'll tell you, those aluminum tariffs didn't last too long. I think it was 4 weeks or something. They pulled them back because I think they knew they made a mistake. And I think they're an important trading partner for us. And we have to work closely with them. So let's see what happens in November. And again, it's my duty as the Premier. I have to deal with all of them. But keep in mind, when we talk to our American friends, I tell them, this is what I get so ticked off with the President with. We're your number one customer. We buy more goods off the United States than China, Japan, the UK combined. And you want to go slap us in the face? And we're your number one customer, we're the closest ally, and you do this to us? That's insulting. And I will always stand up to anyone. I don't care what leader it is in the world. If they come after the people of Canada, I'm coming out swinging at them. It's very simple.
Okay, that's all the time that we have for our questions, and we promised your team that we would stick to the schedule, and I never miss my deadline. So as you would say, Premier, promise made, promise kept. I know that you're having such a good time that you would like to go into overtime, but we're out of time.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. It was a real pleasure, and I got to thank the Dean and Mohammed and his team. And most importantly, I want to thank the students. You're all absolute champions. You're our future. One of you possibly could be the future president of Ryerson. You may be the future dean. You may be the premier. You may be the prime minister, or you may own a big, huge company and employ thousands of people. Just stay confident. We will get through this. We're in this together. And I tell you, we will get out of this together. And thank you. And God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.
Okay, and I think, the Premier, you've got a province to deal with, so if you want to leave the Zoom conference, go ahead. But everyone else, please stand by for a couple of minutes. I just want to say that the reason I saved that question for last about the US is that we would like to have all of you back, invite you all back tomorrow, on Thursday for our next Democracy Forum to talk about Donald Trump and how he changed politics in America, but also in Canada. We've got two great guests. Both of them are great guests. In fact, we have Canada's former ambassador to Washington, David McNaughton, who was on the front lines, and also an outspoken Canadian politician, Naheed Nenshi, the mayor of Calgary, who will talk about how to do politics differently in Canada versus what we've seen in the US. So on behalf of Ryerson, I want to thank the Premier, Doug Ford, for joining the Democracy Forum, and also to our audience, thank you for joining us. You can watch a video of today's event on the YouTube channel of the Faculty of Arts. The video will be up shortly. A special thank you to the sponsor of the event, the Faculty of Arts, and Dean Pam Sugiman, also our president, Mohammed Lashmi, and to the team, Melissa Wong, Director of Operations at the Faculty of Arts, Julia Davidova, and most of all, thanks to you, students and faculty, for tuning in. And we hope to see you Thursday. You know how to register. You've done it for this. You can do it for the next event. Look us up and see you Thursday. Thanks. Take care. Bye for now.